Well, I am sitting here today with Pat Cimo and Matt Markins, who just yesterday have released a brand new book, Leading Kidmin, How to Drive Real Change in Children's Ministry. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So Pat, just to give you a little background, if you don't know Pat and Matt, Pat has been been in children's ministry space for almost 30 years and is currently the director of marriage and family life at Willow Creek in Chicago. And Matt Markins is the vice president of ministry resources at AWANA. And they have teamed up to write a book that definitely will serve the children's ministry leader in a very unique way, because it's not just about doing children's ministry, but leading it, and specifically leading change within it. And so I'm just going to let you guys take this and run with it. And I just want to ask you, why did you write this book?
Well, Pat and I both have a couple of similar themes in our background. And one of them is that we've been a part of ministries that have been around a while. I think Willow Creek just celebrated their 40th year anniversary, and AWANA is in 66 years now. But one of the themes that we share in our ministry is, how do you drive change within a ministry that has a little bit of history to it? And so when we looked out over kind of the landscape of the children's ministry community and all the resources that are available, we see a plethora of resources around, as it relates to change within children's ministry, around the why and the what, but not so much around the how. So I think back to when the book Transforming Children into Spiritual Champions by George Barna, when that came out, there was this collective sigh and rally cry among children's pastors that the research is showing what we have been saying for quite some time. And that was really a tipping point. Now their family ministry has been talked about for a long, long time before that. But that book sort of created a modern day line in the sand where just after that, the Orange Conference popped up, the D6 Conference popped up, and and Lifeways put a lot of energy into the same conversation. Many other ministries have contributed to this conversation of the why and the what around children's ministry. But we really sense that there's a gap when, okay, we get that there's change that needs to happen. I come home from a conference and I start to try to implement this change, and all of a sudden, I'm more frustrated now than I ever have been. And so this resource is really birthed out of that gap of how can we actually coach the Kidmin leader, who's oftentimes the least leveraged on the church staff or among the church volunteers, to drive systemic change, but how can we help them to do just that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So as you know, for somebody that's going to then take this book and read it, what do you hope that it accomplishes for them, and for both that person specifically, as well as for the Kidmin community?
I think one of the first things we're hoping it does is helps them get into their own heart as Kidmin leaders and try to figure out where they might be stuck in trying to move a vision forward, not only for their children's ministry, but for their whole church. The other thing we're hoping for is that it gives them practical skills and application to how to build bridges with senior leadership, how to build bridges with those leading around them and those that they are leading, so that everybody comes along and says, we have a unified vision of where we want this to go. Because so often as a Kidmin leader, you feel like you're out there by yourself and you're not sure where to turn and you're not sure what to do next. So you take the next best apple that you see on the tree and you take a bite into it and you try to, move it forward, and you find yourself getting stuck over and over again. So I would say dig deep to figure out who you are as a leader, as well as how you could build bridges with people that you work day in and day out with. And then to just help them figure out how to actually explain their ministry vision so that senior leadership truly gets it, instead of us using the excuse that they just will never understand. Right. That isn't true. We haven't put our best foot forward to help them understand.
Right. Oh, yeah. And that was something that as I was reading the copy you sent me, I was thinking to myself, there is a deep place that you're speaking to where that leadership that affects real change comes from. And it addresses some of the how-to, but also the how-to internally that I thought you guys addressed really, really well in a way that equips people for the now, but also I think that people that really take this to heart are not going to be looking for something else to do in 3 to 5 years, but are going to be, in ministry for the long haul, as you both have been. So definitely speaking from a place of experience, it's always good. So now, as an author myself, I know that there are oftentimes specific chapters that when I look back on a book that I've written, that I just go, this is the one, or this was the funnest to write, or So when you look at Leading Kidmin, what is the chapter for each of you that is kind of the thing, or was the funnest to write?
Okay, so Matt says I go first. So I would say it might not have been the funnest to write, but it was the one that really helped me go backwards in my journey, and thank God for the work he did inside. And that was all the times I just wanted to run away from ministry. I think it was chapter 4, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure, 3 or 4, but that chapter helped me put language to all the times when I just want to say, I'm done, I quit, I'm finished with this. And yet God opened the doors for me to see that he wasn't done. He wasn't finished with what he wanted me to do, and that he was using kids ministry to make me a better person. And when you get, molded as a clay, you're molded and and God's trying to move you where he wants you to be. Those could be the toughest conversations you have with God. But it was actually, for me personally, it was the best chapter that helped me become even a better person today as we're talking.
Yeah. For me, I'm going to cheat. There were 2 chapters that I think are linked together. One around building partnerships, and one that's being a student of my senior pastor. But there are 2 similar themes there, and that's we can't drive systemic change alone. You have to do it. You have to do it in a more robust manner. Think about anything we see going on in the news or culturally, or you see companies doing significant things. There's always a level of partnership going on within all these stories. And I think in the local church, kind of left to our own, we get scrappy. We do what we need to do to move our thing forward. But to tackle the level of change, see, culturally, there's all this change going on, and the church is facing the change or engaging the change, but we're often not prepared and equipped to meet the change. What we're facing now is so robust in terms of the level of culture change going on. The church has to partner internally with all the key advocates inside. And so I think in order for us to disciple families, to meet the changing needs of the families today, we have to partner internally in a whole different way, and as well as externally. But so if I'm a Kidmin leader, I'm asking myself, as we probably already have been, who are the key people I need to be partnering with to move something forward? But then there's the harder work. Okay, how do I actually be the type of leader who can build those bridges, be vulnerable, gain trust, tackle challenges, and really even conflict management, all of those things. We try to address some of that in a way where we lead upward and we build bridges laterally and down. And that's a really big challenge, but I think it's one that any leader has to really work through. So
good. So as people are doing this deep work, and as they're building those bridges and all that, there's a whole lot of practical stuff, practical content within your book. How do you feel? What are the practical pieces? How do you feel like this book will really help the Kidmin leader?
Well, I think number one, I think the research that you'll read about in the book will help you be able to see that it's a bigger issue. It's more complex than what we thought. It hits everybody, maybe at different levels. So I think the research will help. I also think that our personal stories, and we put it out there. We're not hiding anything. It's out there. That our stuff is out there to help people understand that we're human like them, and we've made many ministry mistakes that we want to share so that others can learn from them and we can learn from them, and we keep moving forward. So I think the research is practical. The personal stories are practical. And then I would say the tools that we're trying to incorporate within the book could really help them at least have something to work with to bring common language with their teams that they're working with, and then they could build on that within the church structure that they find themselves in. So what would you say?
And I think the way to piggyback on that thought, the way the book is structured, the flow of the book, I think we tried to really build it in a way. There's within whether you're a church of whether your Kidmin staff is a group of volunteers with a part-timer or a full staff, but over the course of each season, ministry season, in 5 years from now, your team's going to look different. This is the type of resource where every few years you can pick it back up and walk your team through. So that was really part of the design, is how do we create a resource? I've got a set of business and leadership books on my shelf that have really shaped the way that I think about my craft, my ministry, the trade that we're a part of, et cetera. And I think we tried to craft this book to where it's walking you through how do we navigate ongoing change. And the way even the book is structured kind of helps you give that practical thought application of how you work through that as a leader.
Yeah, I would say it should help you figure out that this is a way of life in leading Kidmin. It's not just something you do one time and then you put it on the shelf. This becomes how you lead.
Yeah. Absolutely. And one of the unique, when you reference, Pat, the tools, one of the tools that you reference several times in the book, which is actually created, is this Kidmin Dashboard. So as people grab their copy of the book, which I'm sure they're going to do the very second this video, they've got to get done watching this interview. But when they do that, they're going to hear about this Kidmin Dashboard. Can you give kind of a high-level overview of what that is?
Yeah, the dashboard is a tool that you can actually look at month by month and to see reality of where your ministry is. It helps you dream of where you want to go. It helps you figure out your facts, because facts are your friends, as Bill Hybel always tells us all the time. So it helps you look at your facts. It helps you look at your dreams. It helps you look at reality, and then it helps you create where you want to go from here. So it's a resource that you could use that gives you a current pulse of where your ministry is today and where you want to go in the future.
Very cool. Yeah, it was something that caught my eye early on, and then I saw it come up again, and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be super helpful for people.
Yeah.
So
as a Kidmin leader, you're running and you're trying to get that weekend up and running. So to take the strategic time that's necessary to really figure out where you're going to go, we forget to do that. So Matt and I just felt like this resource would help. It helps us. I mean, I use it still to this day in what I do, but it helps us to be able to figure out days ahead.
Yeah.
And there were a couple things in the last two questions, the answers that you gave. You referenced a few things. One was the large staff, the volunteer, the small staff, the halftime person, the whatever. Do you feel like this book is really targeted to one, or is it something that is overarching enough that it's really going to be helpful for somebody that's on a staff of many or a staff of one? Or
even in the stories shared, I think you'll see that we tried to reflect the different needs of churches and the different types of teams. It's extremely difficult to write a book that meets the context, the contextual needs of every church.
Right.
But even in our language we tried to contextualize or to frame up our thoughts in such a way that regardless of your context, here's some principles that are sustaining, that are kind of transcendental, if you will. So so I think that was an important approach that we took to the way that we tried to frame that up. So, but yeah, and also in the stories, we were able to hear from different leaders. The research gave us a lot of open-ended responses that we included in some of the chapters. So we're hearing from every segment of the church, you can imagine in terms of size, and the stories that we included of some of our friends, as well as some people who wrote in. You're going to get a wide variety of examples of people who are coming from a different type of environment. So,
yeah, definitely. And then the second you mentioned, you mentioned, I think, Pat, you mentioned the research, and that research is going to be helpful for people. So conducting I know that this wasn't just, we did research as in, we sent an email to our 10 best friends. This is a research project that you did. So that can both be exhilarating and fun, and there can be some real pain points in there. So what did you find, either on either end of that spectrum? What was really eye-opening to you, or what was what were the pain points in doing a research project like that?
Interesting.
Okay, so if you want to talk about the pain point of working cross-functionally, while you're thinking about that, I'll set up. It's important to probably recognize that we had a partner, Sightline Research, based out of Nashville, Tennessee. You can Google them. They were able to help us do a lot of the research, and we appreciate their partnership. But we received responses from 340 Kidmin leaders, so we were actually very surprised and encouraged by the number of people who contributed to this. So we feel like we have some really statistically valid information. So I would guess about half of the chapters address the research. And I think the biggest pain point that I don't think it was clear from the numbers. The biggest pain point was around everyone recognizes the need to work collaboratively and cross-functionally. But in terms of how we're performing in that area, the scores tanked. And I mean, Pat can talk more about kind of what some of our observations were around that.
Yeah, so it tanked with how do I work with the youth pastor? How do I work with the small groups pastor? It showed us that they have a desire, but they don't know how. It also showed us that they didn't know how to become a student of their senior pastor. They felt like their senior pastor had an interest, but not the same level of interest in their ministry as they wish that the senior pastor would have. So it was all about how do we work together and the sticking points that they had to try to figure out their best next step. So I would say that was probably the biggest, the biggest two areas that came out in the research, which we have felt ourselves many times.
Sure.
So we identified with it, and we were able to then figure out from our own stories and listening to others, how do we help people change that? Because we want to change it.
Well, I think it's because working cross-functionally requires so much intentionality.
Yes.
And it requires a level of discipline and a level of time commitment, vulnerability, creating a culture where you can be honest and transparent. I mean, all of that is really hard work, but I'm so passionate about this. If we're going to face the changes going on in our culture and to be a healthy church and be a healthy leadership group, we have to work hard to get to that level. But when we do, the rewards are so significant. I think of Patrick Lenciani in his business writings. He's spent several of his most recent works talking about this, and it is absolutely true. And I think we can even look at Scripture. I mean, to see the value of honesty, transparency, being able to say difficult things but saying them in love and grace. I mean, this is coming straight out of the Bible. But when we do this on a leadership standpoint, it can transform a team.
Absolutely. So that may be. I mean, I could see the passion building as your answer got more and more, which really leads to the final question that I had is, what did you find the most encouraging? If we looked at the pain points, what did you also find the most encouraging about this project, either from a research perspective or just this project as a whole? What have you found most encouraging?
It's a great question, because my mind automatically goes to the personal side for me. But I think, let me tell you a quick story. Just the other day, I had a Kidmin leader, come into my office who read the manuscript, because if the manuscript pointed out some areas in her life that she felt like she needed to change, and how she could actually change the image of who she was with church leadership. And as I listened to her ask her questions and we were able to banter back and forth, I felt like God gave me a picture on how this book is going to help somebody actually change the trajectory of what's happening within their kids' ministry. And it's going to help them figure out how to create a win-win for everybody. So the most encouraging thing for me was seeing that there's a desire from the people who did the research, having this conversation with this Kidmin leader who really wanted to change things but felt even stuck in her own way and how to go forward. And for me personally, to be able to sit there and write stories about where God has grown you is a great process for anybody to go through, where you give him the right praise and the right glory. So the whole process and the conversations during and all of that has just been extremely encouraging for me.
About 2 nights a week or so, I have a difficult time falling asleep just because my brain is spinning. So I turn on Netflix on my iPad. And just recently, I started watching a documentary on Henry Ford. And it's just extremely fascinating to learn about the impact of mass production in all of those systems. And I think by the nature of the fact, the more a local church grows, there's more people coming in and out of your facility in a short period of time on the weekends, especially on Sunday mornings, traditionally. And when you move from 25 kids to 225 kids to 800 kids, depending on what church it is and what area of the country that it's in, it's difficult to program. That is programming. It has to be when you get to a certain number of children and with a limited amount of volunteers. But if we keep the conversation there and don't look at the child, the individual child, on a more holistic level, how do we move the conversation from programming to the discipleship journey of that one child? And now depending on the church, there's a lot of children, but the culture is changing so rapidly. As children's ministry leaders, I think we have to keep challenging ourselves to always think of the individual child. And the church has a role on the programmatic side that's never going to change, that has its place. But systemic change needs to drive different conversations around how do we keep the image of the individual child in our head, and to face the challenges together with all the right partners in the local church and outside the local church to really help these kids to become lifelong disciples and spiritual champions. I think those are significant conversations, and I hope that this book can equip the Kidmin leader to engage in the more systemic conversations around change to meet the needs of discipling that child.
Right,
so,
right. Well said. Well said.
Good. Well, I was going to ask kind of, you have any final thoughts? And you can certainly add something if you want, but that certainly seems like a pretty solid exclamation point. So,
well, can I put you on the spot? So just tell us maybe one thing that we haven't said that you thought was valuable about the book. What spoke to you?
I think for me, there was the book was a bit of a reinforcement to me of something that you guys actually said in the intro. I think the quote from the book that I find myself thinking about over and over as I go to conferences and as I speak to Kidmin leaders, and typically the environment in which I'm speaking to them is at a conference, is that you have a quote, and I'm going to read it so I don't mess it up. But in the intro, you write, becoming a change agent starts with the heart of a leader. It starts with you. And the title of that intro is Trends Are Not the Game Changer, You and I Are. And I think that as you unpack the book, that flows through the whole thing, is that so often we are looking for the next silver bullet, right? We're looking for that thing that is going to transform.
Right.
And the only place we're going to find the thing that's going to transform is by looking at the mirror at a leader who is intentional and filled with the Spirit, right? Who is pursuing Jesus and pursuing being a high quality leader with the Spirit of Jesus, right? And so I think that as you look at the heart of the leader, and as you look at working as a team, and as you look at providing the tools, that I felt like that is what, for me, everything else was a bit of the big unpacking of that concept of you're going to be the one that's going to change, not the next, trend or tool or whatever. That all of those need to come from you. So that was definitely it for me. So thanks so much, guys, for taking the time to sit down and share your heart and share this resource. And thanks for taking the hours. I know that this is loads and loads of hours of effort and time. And I think that what you've created is something that is going to be transformational for many, many people in children's ministry. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so if you want to grab this book, it came out yesterday, and you can grab it right now at any place that sells books. You can get it. And you can find out more at awana.org/leadingkidmin. So go grab your copy of Leading Kidmin, How to Drive Real Change in Children's Ministry by Pat Cimo and Matt Markins. I really hope that you grab it today. And if you are not in children's ministry, buy a copy and give it to your children's or family ministry pastor, because they need to read it. So thanks again, you guys. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.